We're on Lamed Gimel. We started the chapter on Busha. Busha means modesty. I mean, it could be translated in more modern Hebrew like being embarrassment, because it's related to embarrassment. A person who's modest will feel a certain degree of perhaps embarrassment. So up to Lamed Gimel on the last paragraph on the page. Davar yadua uborur. The main thing that he was saying from what we saw yesterday is that a person should have busha from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means out of a person's modesty, he should be aware of the presence of God. And very often, if people are embarrassed about doing anything wrong, they're embarrassed about other people seeing them. But if nobody sees them, they would go ahead and do what it is that they want. They wouldn't have any compunctions about it. And the point is that a person should feel even more so regarding God, just as we are aware of people seeing us and being aware of what we do, and we would be embarrassed to do certain things in front of other people. We should certainly be embarrassed to do things in front of God, who we don't have to see Him to be seen by Him, and therefore he was talking yesterday about ways in which you could develop your natural feeling of modesty and awareness that God is present, in order to do the things that we're supposed to be doing and refrain from doing the things that we're not supposed to be doing. A lower level is this idea of, if if I wouldn't do it in front of other people, I shouldn't do it in front of God. A higher level would simply be, I don't want to do this in front of God. The awareness that God is present, that God sees a person, is aware of a person, what's doing. God is also aware not only what's going on the outside of a person, God is aware of what's going on the inside of a person as well. So God knows a person's feelings and knows a person's thoughts. Therefore, a person should really be embarrassed to harbor incorrect thoughts, because it's the same thing. A person's in a room and he wants to do something which is unacceptable. He'll look around and make sure he closes the windows, closes the drapes, the door is closed, it's locked, and then he'll do what it is he wants to do. Yeah? Because he's convinced that nobody can see him. He's here alone. So the similar thing, a person said, well, I can harbor all different types of thoughts, and nobody knows what I'm thinking. I can walk around in a street full of people and be thinking about things which are unacceptable, and nobody knows what I'm thinking. Yeah? But it's the same thing. That's like being in that locked room where you don't think anybody sees, but God is there. Same thing is in your mind. He knows what you're thinking, and therefore it doesn't help to say. So this brings up to the second paragraph on that page Lamed Gimel, towards the bottom. Dover yudua v'borur. It's well known and clear. Asher kol ha'olam oisim inyonim rabim b'seser. The entire world does many different things in private. V'chen medabrim bedvarim rabim b'seser, and they speak all different types of things in private. V'choshvim machshavos rabos, and they think all different types of thoughts, which of course are, by definition, in private. Ve'in choshishim klal, rak shelo yivadu ha'inyanim. They're not concerned at all. Then they just have to make sure that the things don't get known. V'imayu kol ma'aseim she'asu min ne'orehem, from their youth, for all the things they spoke, and all the thoughts that they thought, present, apparent before all people, they would be very embarrassed. Imagine if all the things you ever did, and all the things you ever said, and all the things you ever thought, let's say particularly the bad ones, were automatically transposed onto some kind of a placard, some kind of a sign, when you walked around the street with that sign on, and everybody could see. More than that, let's say you had this little video camera attached to you, and everything that you said, did, and thought bad and wrong was right there. And wherever you go, people see you doing those things. Playback. Yeah?
It'd be most embarrassing.
It would be most embarrassing. You wouldn't even make any public appearances. You wouldn't even go out. Yeah? And that's really what it's all about. All of that is recorded, and it's right. It's recorded, and it's known. In times, there's an idea that in olden times, before there was technology, people's belief in God was palpable, was real enough that when the Pirkei Avot, I think Nati, you asked a while back, what is Pirkei Avot, right? When Pirkei Avot says, know what's above you, an eye that sees, an ear that hears, and all of your deeds are written, yeah? So people understood that. Their emunah pshuta, their simple emunah, enable them to understand that God actually hears what you're saying. He sees what you're doing. He writes down. It's recorded. Yeah. Nowadays, people with our modern mindsets are very far away from God. And it could be that technology is one way in which God has given us a palpable example about how God hears what we do, how God sees what we do, how everything we do is recorded like a cassette or like a video, like a computer, right? Data, it's all stored, and all that's required is to press the playback button and the whole thing, all the data comes appearing before your eyes. How many times does the word such and such appear in Hamlet, Shakespeare's Hamlet? Pun in the word, boom, it's all there. How many times has this person said a curse word in his life?
Oh, maybe 1 million.
Yeah, just the sh word appears 5,766 times, and it's all recorded, right? How many times has this person embarrassed other people? Boom, it's all recorded, like an Excel chart. X, Y, A, B, C, D, E. It's all there. It's all recorded. And therefore, a person can use like our familiarity with technology and recognize that if human beings can design, electronics and software and things like this, which can be so powerful in terms of storing and information recall, then what? God can't do that?
That's a very interesting concept.
God can't do that. He who creates the eye, we spoke yesterday. He who creates the eye, he who enables sight, doesn't see. So clearly, if all of this were publicized, we would be very embarrassed. And that itself, if we knew that everything we did and said and thought would be publicized, right? Then that would go a long way to preventing us from doing things which are unacceptable. And all of the celebrities and all of the political figures who get embroiled in all types of scandals, do so thinking that they're never going to get caught, even though they always get caught. But they didn't do it. They don't do it thinking they're going to get caught. They think they're not going to get caught. If they thought they would get caught. They wouldn't do it. Yes. So that's generally when people thought they would be held accountable for what they've done. They wouldn't do it. And that's why if we understand, if we comprehend that everything we do it's known, it's recorded, we're going to be held accountable for it, that would be a very strong kind of tool to refrain from doing these things. And where does the ability to think about this come from? From humility, from modesty, from the idea that I'm not the end all. There is a God, and I'm willing to recognize that. And therefore, a person will humbly subject himself before God and be embarrassed about doing all types of things, saying all types of things, and even thinking types of things which he thinks are not heard, but there certainly are. Do you ever think about like a person, doesn't matter what or who, and you thought to yourself, wow, if that person could just read my mind? Yeah?
Yep.
Like,
or if you could read their mind,
yeah, somebody think, wow, I wish I could read her mind, right? Yeah, but sometimes you know what you're thinking, and you know what that person would think if they knew what you were thinking, and you think, wow, I wonder, like, what would happen if he could read my mind, or she could read my mind? If that's happening, then the person should probably think, maybe I shouldn't be thinking this. All the more so, a person should have embarrassment before God. If he would be embarrassed before other people, if they knew, all the more so, he should be embarrassed in front of God, who we knows. Hamashkif el elavavos, he looks into the hearts. V'roy hamachshavos, and he sees into one's thoughts. V'yodea kol hamasim, and he is aware of all of our acts. Dvarim v'machshavos. Sha'asa adam kol yamav, not only today, now, but all of the days of one's life. Vein lefanav shikha, and he doesn't forget. Shetzarich litbayesh lefanav vein likalem. Certainly in front of such an all-knowing God, a person should feel embarrassment, should feel modesty. When you think about it, we forget what we did an hour ago. And the trivial things, we forget in a few minutes. Even important things we forget in a day or two or a few weeks or months. did I do that? I don't remember. I don't remember. Did I go there? Did we go to the? Like you don't remember, or even if you do, when was that? What was that? Was that 2005 or 2002? Let me think. That was the summer I got. And it's hard to remember things like that. But if it were in the computer, again, just press a button, boom, it's all there. And that's what God is. That's what God is. God, every single thing that we do is recorded, and it's accessed immediately. The big things and the small things that we've long forgotten, it's all there. There's another important thing too, which is very often, we find it usually pretty easy to remember the way people harmed us. But it's pretty easy to forget the way we harmed other people. Things that we do to offend other people, we let it pass and forget. So same, we'll harbor like a grudge against somebody just because they looked at us the wrong way or they made a comment that was like snide or cynical. Even if I'm not really sure, but like when I walked in, he said something or did something that made me look a little uncomfortable. I can remember that for years. But if I do that to somebody else, I won't think twice about it. Right? So again, we have selective memory, but that's not the case regarding God. Arba Medregos Babusha, page Lamadal. There are 4 different levels of this embarrassment. What are they? The first one, one who's embarrassed to do transgressions in public, but he has no compunction about doing them in private. So he's embarrassed in front of other people. Such a person is as if he is like, it's as if he's like cheating God. It's as if he's like, misleading God. Of course, that's not true because God certainly does know what's going on. But that's what he thinks. Because he's embarrassed in front of the world, but not in front of God. The evil of this is very bad. That's the first one. Hashniya, the second. He's embarrassed in front of the world. And also in private, he'll also refrain from doing transgressions. Because his fear of human beings is just extended into the private realm. It's not that he's concerned about God. It's true nobody sees me, but it could get out. And if it got out, I'd be really embarrassed. So he refrains again because of people. Because God I guess maybe what he's adding here is that he's afraid to do it in private because he thinks it'll get known to people and then he'll be embarrassed in front of God. That's kind of an interesting concept. What does that mean? Does that mean there's like a scenario where a person would be embarrassed to do something in front of other people, but he wouldn't be embarrassed to do it in private in front of God, but if it got out, he would be embarrassed in front of God? I can envision such a scenario. Let's say you have a person who's basically, he's like an observant person. Yes. He wouldn't want to do something in public because that would look wrong for him and it would be a bad reflection against God. He would consider doing it in private if it wouldn't get known, and he's not really concerned because that's just between he and God. Yeah. But he would be embarrassed to have it get known because then he would look bad in front of God. Such a person, such a religious person is doing such a thing? Maybe that's the distinction. If he was not observant, he could say, okay, maybe it would be embarrassing, but people would say, okay, people who are not religious do this type of thing all the time. But that a religious person should be doing this, he would be embarrassed not only in front of people, but he would be embarrassed in front of God. Even though in private he would not be embarrassed in front of God. That's a pretty subtle point. That's a pretty subtle point. That's the second level. Hashlishis, the third one, Im Yakshov, if he thinks, how can I do in private this thing? Asher is bayesh lifnei ha'eved yoser mifnei ha'adoin. something that I'd be embarrassed to do in front of the slave more than the master himself. Vegnov dasel yona, should I kind of like, again, mislead God on high? And in this way he'll refrain from doing the transgression. Malas toivi hizos, this is even better. So I think what he's saying is, I wouldn't do it in front of other people. But other people are like slaves themselves to the master, that's God. So I'm going to do something in front of my fellow slaves that I'd be embarrassed in front of doing in front of the master. That would clearly be wrong. And therefore he doesn't do that. That would be the third level. And the Revi, the fourth, im yizbayan she'odam v'golui uveseser lifnei Hashem levad. He's embarrassed both in private and in public, only in front of God. So the reason why he's refraining from doing it in public is not because of other people, but it's because of God himself. Wherever he is, he would be embarrassed to do anything wrong in front of God, in public or in private. Ein mala lamala mi mala zos. There's no greater degree than this degree. And that's what we should be aiming towards. Refraining from doing anything incorrect, even in private, because of God himself. You might think, like, that's not such a big deal. I mean, we all believe in God, don't we?
Of course.
And we all believe that God is present, and God sees us, and God hears us, and God records. So what's the big deal that we would refrain from doing transgressions in private because of these thoughts? Don't we all think them? Don't we all know them?
I think, like, if I can interject one second?
Yeah, please do.
I think when you actually feel a pang of guilt within yourself.
When you really what?
When you're doing something bad and you don't feel no pang of guilt or no
pang of guilt
anyway, that's because God's not really too bothered. But when you're doing something, even on your own, and you're feeling in a pang of guilt and you stop doing it, that's because Hashem's bothered about it. He's letting you know.
Hashem himself is bothered by it. He lets you know about it.
That's why you refrain from doing it.
That's an interesting idea. It could be the closer the person is to God, the more he kind of cares about it, and so the more you feel the pain. That's an interesting idea.
I also wanted to add something similar to what you're saying. That from the Tanya, I don't know if you're familiar, but there's like an idea over there, like chapter 1. There's like a Rasha v'tov lo, Rasha v'ra lo, Tzaddik v'tov lo, Tzaddik v'ra lo. So it shows you if a person is a Rasha v'ra lo, if a person is doing something in private and he feels it, like he knows that he's doing something bad.
He feels bad about it.
He feels bad about it. That's already, in a sense, kind of better in the first step already versus the person who does something in private and he's like, fine, I don't care, like I don't even feel anything. I'm just doing something private. And same with the good person, like tzaddik v'tov lo. Tzaddik v'ralo is a person that's doing all the right things and like stops thinking stuff, but he doesn't enjoy it, he doesn't love it.
That's an interesting idea.
Versus a person who's a tzaddik gamur, which is a person who's
tzaddik v'tov lo. He's a tzaddik and he feels good about being a tzaddik. The other person's a tzaddik, but if v'ralo,
like feel like, I'm missing out. You know what I mean? So similar. I feel like a person.
That's a nice idea. Where'd you hear that idea from?
Tanya.
But something you understood yourself, or you were in a shir? Somebody spoke about it?
I've been learning it for 2 years already.
Yeah, but I'm saying that. In a shir.
This is like this.
Yeah, because that's not the
pshat.
No, that's not the pshat in Tanya. Tanya doesn't explain that.
What do you mean?
Tanya's he talks about tzaddik v'tov lo, tzaddik ralo, but he doesn't explain the explanation you gave.
Oh,
that's a taich.
Yeah,
that's like a perush.
You're right. Fine. So that was with Rabbi Shmuel in Tanya Chabad.
Okay, that's very nice. Very nice idea. That like you have a tzaddik, you have a rosh of a tov lo. Yeah, I mean, see, he's a Russia and he's happy about being a Russia.
He's happy, like he doesn't care, And
you have a Russia Varalo, even though he's a Russia, but he has like pangs of guilt.
Yeah, he's halfway there.
And then you have a tzaddik Varalo. He's a tzaddik, but
we always to understand it a little bit better in our like real way, like a real world. We always compare it to like fitness and like dieting. Like if you eat bad food, then like you don't care about it. Yeah. You're just eating and you don't care. Versus a person who's like he's eating a cake and he knows he shouldn't be eating and he feels bad about it. He's probably going to be a person that's more like
he's closer to do something about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even though he's eating that cake.
I think it's just somebody who likes to watch what they eat.
Pardon me?
I'm joking. I said that's just somebody who likes to watch what they eat. Someone who likes to watch what they eat.
What they eat, sure.
What they ate.
But everybody's kind of more or less on that path, Nobody wants to.
I think it's all about your own relationship with God. Depends on how guilty you feel about bad things you do. Like if you're close to God, then you're gonna feel when you do something bad, you know it's bad.
Yeah.
And you're getting in a pang of guilt. But if you don't believe in God and you're a wayward person, then you're not going to care.
Yeah, but what you said before was the reciprocal of that as well, which is that you were suggesting that the more God cares about a person, the more he's likely to feel the guilt. It's not just the more he feels about God, but the more God feels about him. So I just started to say, isn't it pretty obvious? I mean, we believe in God. We believe that God knows what's going on. And so it shouldn't be obvious and easy for most people to refrain from doing transgressions because God is present. Yet you see that that's not the case.
In a perfect world, maybe, but it's not.
Yeah, in reality, right, most people will do the transgressions that they want to do in private, even though ordinarily if you stop them and they would admit, well, God is present, God sees. So what's happening? That even though mentally we might come to that realization in a perfect world, practically a person gets all embroiled in desire to do all different types of things, and that causes him temporarily to forget God or forget the fact that God is, or it's the Satan or the Yetzer Hara comes and kind of convinces the person.
So I was just thinking of the Yetzer Hara, that's when he's.
God really, even if God knows, He understands.
Yeah.
He understands how you feel right now,
Try and justify it.
Yes, and you'll make it up another time. So that's why we saw yesterday the Gemara in which the rabbi said to his students before his passing, he said that before you transgress, you should think that people are watching. And so he said, what, people are watching? That's, that our fear of heaven should be like our fear of human beings. And he said, you should know, because when a person transgresses, he doesn't look around to see whether God's looking over his shoulder. He looks over his shoulder to see whether somebody else is looking. And that's the reality of it. When a person gets all embroiled in what he wants to do, he forgets God. Or if he thinks about God, he thinks...
Rabbi said that, by the way?
It's a Gemara in Brachas. It was Ben Zakkai. That's in Brachas, Brachot, Kafchet Amud Bet.
Orchot Tzaddikim, right?
Yes.
These are something of the sages?
What? The Orchot Tzaddikim? What's the meaning of the book?
No, where is it coming from, this information?
Oh, the Orchot Tzaddikim was written by anonymous authors, so we don't know who the author of Orchot Tzaddikim is. But it was
really?
but it was an early, it was an early book, and it seems like it was written in Sfat. It was probably written by one of the great rabbis in Sfat around the times of the Arizal, let's say the 1600s.
I was going to say, it's not that old. It's only like 400 years.
Right. That's right.
So
and it's a collection of many different teachings from the Talmud and from the Midrash and from the Psukim and from Tanakh.
Now is
that observations, yeah?
Pardon me?
It's like observations.
Observations?
Yeah, this is like
It's like a collection. It's a collection. Yes, the author's collection observations on ethical teachings throughout all of the different sources in Jewish.
So is this only one line of Musar? Is there other authors and other followers that you can follow Musar?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Musar is a general collection of the part of the Jewish library, but there are many different authors and many different books, and there are different styles in Musar as well.
Did you ever contradict?
Yeah, I suppose they could contradict. I suppose they could.
Okay.
I don't think in Musar. I don't think in Musar it's so relevant to talk about contradictions. In Hasidus, there could be more of a tendency for there to be contradictions.
What are these
In
observations?
Hasidus or in Kabbalah or things having to do with hashkafa, thought and belief, there you would find, let's say, difference of opinions, and the difference of opinions would probably be more substantial. I don't think in Musar it's so likely to find a machloket, and even if there is, I don't think it would be so substantial. What was that?
Is this based on a halacha in it?
Not really. I mean, not really. I mean, it could connect. It could be connected. All of Torah is interconnected, but Musar is not really connected to halacha. I mean, I'm just giving you why am I saying that somewhat reluctantly? Because just yesterday we were talking about in the discussion of modesty. Yeah. When a person is relieving himself, for example, there's a requirement to keep oneself covered as much as necessary, and
that's why.
Yeah, so and there are halakhas about that. What part of the body a person can touch, and in what way, in what circumstances, whether he's single and not, and so forth and so on. I don't right now want to elaborate on that. But yeah, so like any area of Torah, you could get onto another area of Torah because it's all interconnected. But generally speaking, it's not a halakha type of a thing. So we're up to, I think, Lamed Daled, and this is maybe something that Nati said. I think, and also you actually connects very naturally into this next paragraph. The one starting Omru Chachamim was said by the sages called Oisei Dover Avera Misbayesh Bo, Anybody who transgresses and he's embarrassed about having done that transgression, mochlin lo al kol v'nosav. They actually forgive him of all of his transgressions. That's also a very interesting teaching. Anybody who transgresses and he's embarrassed about that transgression, because he's embarrassed about that transgression, he's forgiven for all of his transgressions.
Wow.
That's an interesting idea. Like, why? First of all, it seems clear that it's because of his embarrassment. Because he's embarrassed about what he's done, so he's forgiven for what he's done wrong. But beyond that, it says, it's talking about one thing. Anybody who does something wrong and is embarrassed about it, that one thing, so because of that embarrassment, all of his transgressions are...
Wow.
Why would that be? If he's embarrassed about this thing, so at most, let him wipe out this thing. But why should the embarrassment about this thing wipe out all of the other things?
Maybe because Hashem's a loving God and he loves his people, and if they show the embarrassment for the one thing, they're taking a big step to because man's obviously weak in thought a lot of the time. So if Hashem can see that they're genuinely embarrassed about that, he's probably willing to wipe the whole slate clean.
Okay.
He's hoping that next time they'll be embarrassed again and again and again.
Nice, yeah. Okay. This morning, we're talking about mechanisms. But like, what's the mechanism? How does it actually work?
I think because an embarrassment, from what I understand, embarrassment in Judaism is seen a lot greater than what like mainstream public people see. Like the idea of you embarrass someone in public is like almost equal to you killing him.
Spilling blood, right?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
So I mean, there's a story of a rabbi here. There's like a line of people to come see him, and then like one guy came and he started saying like Rasha, and this guy's like an honest, good person apparently, but he's studying then the rabbi. He came for a blessing from the rabbi. He's calling him Rasha, and he's like get out of here. Don't like you tell people. The guy left. He's like shocked. He's like, what just happened? He was all like terrified. He felt terrible. And then, like, later, they asked the rabbi, he said, well, I saw the angel of death above him, and he said that I felt the embarrassment that he caused him was so bad, it was like killing him without really killing him. So he didn't have to really die, so he, like, saved his life.
The rabbi embarrassed the person, is that how it went?
Yes,
right.
yes.
So he actually saved his life in that case by embarrassing, because
exactly.
It was tantamount to killing him, so... that exempted from the angel to take his life.
Like that story kind of like really visualize how big embarrassment is in Judaism, and embarrassing someone, especially in front of other people. So I think that if you feel embarrassed, it's like you're so. What's the definition of embarrassed? You're probably so ashamed of yourself that you did something that like you're almost like reborn. You're almost like
That's an interesting idea too. It's almost as if like because of embarrassment, he goes through a type of like a death penalty, and going through that type of a death penalty
of embarrassment. I mean,
will exempt him from all.
Feel bad about something.
Right.
Like, you're really
embarrassed,
ashamed of yourself that it like almost gives you like a daf chadash.
I
like that.
Again, if you're that embarrassed about something, you be careful never to do it.
Yeah, I like that.
Feel that kind of embarrassment again.
Very nice. I like both of those ideas. Another idea that I wanted to add is that he's embarrassed now. It's true. If we understand the teaching literally, if somebody who does something wrong and is embarrassed about it, he's forgiven for all of his transgressions. The question is, I can understand why he'd be forgiven for this transgression, but for all the others, what's the connection? So I thought to myself, another possibility is, right now he's embarrassed about this thing. At that time that he's embarrassed about this thing, if you were to ask him, remember when you did that? How do you feel about that? He would also be embarrassed. It's not that he's embarrassed about this thing. He's embarrassed about having done something wrong. That feeling of being embarrassed about doing something wrong would be applicable across the boards. So that it's really tantamount to being embarrassed for everything that he's done wrong, and at that moment he would be forgiven. You shouldn't do something wrong and say, well, I'll feel embarrassed with the intention of getting forgiven. But if he generally does something wrong without having that in mind, and then he's genuinely embarrassed, so according to this, for maybe some of the reasons we suggested, it would actually slave him of all of his transgressions.
That's a beautiful concept, really.
Yeah. Pretty powerful. So, v'od amru, and furthermore, the sages said, "Boshes panim legan eden." A person who is embarrassed has a place in the world to come, the Garden of Eden. You could understand this differently. I mean, another way of explaining this verse is, "Boshes panim legan eden" means people who are generally humble, they will go to Gan Eden. But the author here is explaining it in a different way, which is a person who suffers embarrassment will go to Gan Eden. V'omru Chachamim, and the sages said, Habusha ve'emuna, that embarrassment and belief, mechubaros zo lamala mizo, they're connected one above the other. It's funny, it doesn't say one to the other, but one above the other. Let's see if there's which one is more elevated. Ki habaishan machzik be'emuna im kol odam. The baishan, the embarrassed person, he will, I guess, have faith or hold faith in other people. Umishenu ne'eman and loboshes. The person who is not faithful, so he has no embarrassment. He's not a faithful, trustworthy person. He has no embarrassment. He'll brazenly do whatever he wants. Therefore, the wise man said, when you're not embarrassed, you'll do whatever you want. Meaning a person who has no busha, he has no natural sense of his embarrassment, he'll do whatever he wants. He's totally brazen and doesn't care. He doesn't feel like he's doing what's wrong, and if he does anything wrong, he doesn't care, so he'll do whatever he wants. So you see here the interconnectedness between a person who's embarrassed and being faithful, trustful, faithful to other people and to God.
So is this saying that it's good to have some kind of like an embarrassment system, I guess, in your mindset, like that way you don't do whatever you want?
Yeah, that's right. You're right. That would come out of this. Yeah, it's good to have some type of embarrassment system to prevent yourself from doing this. The first thing is to be aware that you're doing something wrong. The second thing is to feel that you should be embarrassed for doing something wrong. The third thing is that you're embarrassed of other people doing it. And if you're aware of it being wrong and that you should be embarrassed, particularly if other people are thinking and watching and knowing, then all the more so you should be embarrassed in front of God.
So what if that's something that the whole the root, the something that you're doing that's the wrong thing is not necessarily wrong thing. It's just wrong according to someone, but it's not wrong according to you. I'll give you an example for me where I was just thinking about you and doing it. When I moved to Arizona, there's not a big Jewish community over there, and the community that I connected with the most, speaking Russian and everything, was the Bukharian community. And in the Bukharian community, if you're like if you're not married, like if you're like a baka kind of
single,
smoking a cigarette is like a very frowned upon thing. It's wrong according to the community. I come from Israel, where everybody and their mother smokes cigarettes. You know? So when I moved over there, like between lessons, whatever, on the shul, like all the kids, 25 years old, you know, walk like 3 miles away and smoke a cigarette so nobody sees them. And I don't know anybody in the community. Then I'm my relatives. And I wouldn't care. Just sit outside front and smoke. Everybody would come out and like look at me, and then I'd think to myself, like, am I doing something really wrong, or is it wrong just because according to them, is it really wrong? It's just the fact that they're considering it wrong. Is that
yeah. Look,
you know what I mean?
Ultimately, it depends on this.
This is an example, not specifically that.
So the first thought that I thought to answer you was that it's not whether I think it's wrong or whether he thinks it's wrong, but we're talking about what God says is right or wrong. So that's really what we're talking about. It's not up to me or him, right? Now, they could have a scenario where, rabbis might consider this to be right or wrong. Rabbis might argue about it. But let's say we know pretty clearly, according to God, what's right and wrong. So that's what we're talking about. The scenario that you're talking about is related to that, and it's a very good question. But it would seem to me that, to a certain extent, it should be like, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. What I mean to say is, you're kind of a newcomer to the community. Or even if you're not, you've been there for a while, but it's a pretty well-established community with a pretty cohesive type of a social network, and they have their own morals and their own norms and stuff like that. And if it's considered to be unacceptable to them, even though to you or where you come from it wouldn't be, it seems to me that it would probably be better to be considerate. Number one, not to fluff their feathers. And number two, if their young people are embarrassed about it because they think it's the wrong thing to do and their culture kind of says the wrong thing to do. I don't know
if you do Baharian culture, but not specifically. It's like everybody smokes first.
Yeah, but they're embarrassed about it enough to do it that they do it far away.
Yeah.
So if you do it like, say, well, I'm an Israeli, I'm not a Bukharian, I can do it smoke in front of the elder's face, for example. So in a way, you're like, what's the word I'm looking for? What's that? Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. But I meant to say also, like, you're eroding their natural embarrassment that they have to do what they understand to be wrong, even if you don't think it's wrong. So at a certain place, you're kind of eroding their values.
I think.
And so it would seem to be, even though I don't think you'd be doing anything wrong by doing it, it would probably be better to be more considerate, not to do that.
Sometimes people.
I understand you, because on the other hand, it's like why should their moral system be imposed on me? So now I have to walk 2 miles away to smoke my cigarette because it's not, to them it's not acceptable. Well, I wouldn't say to make yourself neurotic about it, but it's good to be aware of their customs and try to respect them.
So it would be
I don't think it. Yeah, I think it would be better to try and be sensitive to it. At least not flout it. You not say, "Look, I'm not bound by their rules, so I'll do what I want." Because in the end of the day, as a Jew, you have a responsibility to your fellow Jews, and here it's not that they're doing anything like wrong, per se from the Torah point of view. But the fabric of their society dictates
it just seemed by them. It's just interesting. It just seemed that Baharians, like, they see someone, like, if you drink or if you smoke a cigarette, then
that's right.
Like a front, you're like a bad person.
Yeah. So what are you going to break that? You're going to break that perception?
Do you think things like that though take away the true meaning of being embarrassed? When you're embarrassed in front of God, you feel it personally, like it makes you feel bad. When you're embarrassed in front of other people and they rip the fun out of you, sometimes it can desensitize you to embarrassment because you get so much harbour so many bad feelings to people embarrassing you, you cease to become embarrassed.
Yeah, that's also true. But the community is set up the way it is, and they have their norms, and the same thing could be, for example, physical contact between men and women in the Bukharian community. It's still very frowned upon. I don't know if they always date, but no physical contact.
What is the Bulgarian community?
Baharians are Sephardi Jews that.
Oh, I understand.
Baharians are Sephardi Jews that come from Uzbekistan and Tajikistan in the Soviet Union. So they speak Russian. They also speak Farsi as like their second language.
But they're still Jewish.
They're
Jewish.
It's like Persian.
But they're more like traditional.
I know what you mean.
They're not necessarily observant in all cases.
Like,
yeah, and here, even if they're not observant, although some are, but even if they aren't, they're still more traditional than other non-religious, non-observant
They
people.
really only have three big communities. Like they can be anywhere, but the three communities, and one thing I really respect and like about them, that they always stick together.
All Jews should stick together.
Yeah, but they really stick
very
together.
Cohesive, very cohesive.
They're like brother, and I have a friend. All my friends are Baharian in Arizona. Yeah. I have a friend. It's 4 brothers, all their wives and kids, and their parents all live in one complex.
Right.
Wow.
So it's always together.
That's
no matter
a beautiful
what.
Thing,
Absolutely.
That's a beautiful thing for the Jewish people.
For sure.
Okay, wait. So let's not digress on that point too far. Just we have to start wrapping up because we got to get you guys in this class. So I think that Umisha and Emma. So I guess before starting the next paragraph, which. Let's go ahead and make a run on the next paragraph. A person should be very careful not to do something that
he would be embarrassed to show his friend.
That he would be maybe embarrassed to tell his friend. A person that's got something in private, somebody comes into him, and he's embarrassed to tell him to leave. The point is, be careful not to put yourself in a position where other people are going to be embarrassed to tell you something. For example, that's the example. You go visit your friend in his home, and now he's in his home, he's embarrassed to tell you to leave. So you basically don't. You have to be careful not to impose yourself, being in position on other people. Yeah. In this example, I go to your house and I put you in a situation now where you're embarrassed to tell me to leave. What are you going to tell me to leave? Right? That's nice. So I've basically been in a position on you.
Me personally, if I wanted someone to leave, I'd tell them.
Well, but here the point would be: don't put yourself in a situation where you'll be doing to the other person who will not be able to tell them to leave.
Yes.
So you might be able to tell the person to leave, but other people might not. Be careful not to put. In a way, we're talking about not embarrassing other people, right? So, not embarrassing other people also would include: don't put people in embarrassing situations. For example, that they won't be able to endure and do anything about, like you visiting them at a bad time, it's an imposition, and they can't tell you otherwise. Or, for example, if he's staying at his friend's house, and it's become an imposition, and he's embarrassed to tell him to leave. Listen, you've been here for a week, I'm sorry, it's time to go. No, he won't say anything, but now you're being an imposition. Or for example, he starts going through his friend's belongings and reading his letters. And his friend is embarrassed, don't look at my letters. So, but he puts him in this situation. And other such things. Be very careful with this. Not to be in a position on anybody in any way. ושלא ישאל שום דבר ממנו במתנה, או להשיל כליו, אם עושיו במקום שיודע שאין עושה ברצון ומתבייש להשיב פן הריקם. But don't ask to borrow things or use things of your friend when you know that you're really putting him on the spot and he doesn't want to, but since you put him on the spot, he's forced to.
Feel obliged to. Do you think this means, Rabbi, that you yourself shouldn't go into situations where it causes them kind of predicaments?
Yes, that's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. It's like an extension of what we were talking earlier about not embarrassing other people. Nati spoke about how bad it is to embarrass other people. Yes. Not only would that be if you curse somebody out in public and he feels embarrassed. Yes. Just here, the same thing. If you go and you make an imposition of yourself upon other people, in a way that involves embarrassment because you're putting them in a scenario where they're forcing this situation upon them and they're embarrassed to do anything about it. You're causing them embarrassment, even if it's not public shame.
You're doing bad in the eyes of Hashem, and you're putting them in a position where they might have to do bad in the eyes of Hashem by telling you to leave.
Possibly,
so it's like a double guilted sword.
Yeah, and if they don't, then you're causing them embarrassment, even if it doesn't involve shame.
Yes,
Nati's scenario was talking about shame. You're embarrassing the person in terms of shame. Here, the person might not feel shame, but he's embarrassed to do anything, so you're causing this person to suffer embarrassment. You're embarrassing him.
What, you causing him to suffer embarrassment because he can't tell you to leave?
Yeah.
Well, it might be nice. It might feel rachmanus for you and not one of
Let's say he's in a situation where he can't. זה לא נעים לו. לא נעים לו להגיד לך לצאת. אז עכשיו אתה בעצם תגורם לו בושה מסוימת. כאילו תגורם לו להתבייש לומר לך לצאת. That's the point. That's also considered to be busha. Sure. Not only are you mevayesh pana barabim, like a sense of shame, but if you're imposing upon him in a way that he can't say anything, you're also causing him to suffer shame, embarrassment.
Sorry, what does busha mean again?
Busha means embarrassment.
Right. That's my notes.
Okay, let's stop here, and so you can get ready to the next class.